I could be going through the worst of days and none of it matters. And if you just were to step back, hindsight's always 20/20, but you look back at your life, oh, God had me here for a reason. He did this. He's right there. And so often we're just not spending that time. And I think that's what worship is kind of forcing us to do.
What is up? You have tapped or clicked on the Nook podcast, but you probably knew that. My name is Steven, and I am so honored to have you here today. As we get started, could I ask a quick favor? Please pop over to Apple Podcasts, rate the Nook 5 stars, and leave a quick review. It really does help spread the word about what's happening here. And if you send me a screen grab of your review and a mailing address, I will send you some free stuff. Send that to steven@nookpodcast.com. That email address is always in the show notes, along with links to the Nook Facebook page, my social media feeds, and one that just says support the show, which is a safe and simple way for you to help out financially. This is week 5 of the Spirit and Truth series, taking a look at making worship a priority as we begin this new year. I've said in nearly every episode of this series, worship is something that most of us probably equate to that thing we do while we're in church. But let me ask you this. What about while you're driving to work, or at the gym, or cleaning the house, or mowing the lawn? I'm more and more convinced that we should be conscious of worshiping God throughout the day. And though music isn't the only way to worship, it surely sets a tone for what we're doing. If you are fortunate enough to live in a city where Air One radio is syndicated, or you have the app on your phone, you're probably familiar with the morning team, Dan and Michelle.
Air One, we're Dan and Michelle, and we are going to describe our wedding day in 45 seconds. It was
because
June 7th.
We're married to each other.
We are married to each other. It was June 7th. I had not a care in the world because Michelle planned everything. She actually tried to get me to plan one thing, and that was like the things on the tables, and I was like, heart whisks and mints, and I'm out. So I just kind of showed up with my tuxedo, and I said I do.
Tell me when to be. He actually worked that morning. He went into work. Didn't you go to a movie?
I did.
We're setting up the venue, running around, sweating.
I think I went to a tanning bed too.
Hair. It was beautiful though.
They love what they do and have such a simple philosophy for their show.
We like to create a fun, inviting, we're very make the listener the star kind of show. Love interacting with people. We like to be on the lighter side. We're not heavy. We're not, super, we're not preachy. We're definitely not preachy. We like to be fun. And so our whole motto has been since the very beginning of our show is, there's joy in the Lord, and that's what we're all about. And we're hoping you listen and you get smiles, you get laughs, and you get relatability, and you get the marriage aspect that a lot of our, your audience has, that they go, oh yeah, me too.
My husband does that too.
So I would invite you guys to listen and check it out. If you like it, reach out and connect with us on socials and all that stuff. If you don't like it, we don't want to hear from you.
They aren't just playing music on the radio. This is much more important to them. And I think you will enjoy this discussion all about that with Dan and Michelle. Dan, I want to start with you. And this is the first time that I can ever remember having the opportunity to do this within a series. But you texted me the day that the first episode of this series released, when I was talking to Jen Smale. Rather than me try to assume where you were, I'm just curious, what was your motivation in just reaching out based on what was being said in that interview?
Well, worship fascinates me, and working for Air One, being in the transition from what Air One used to be and to what Air One is now, I feel close to it. I've seen a change in it, and being the music director for Air One, I kind of feel a little bit of ownership to it. I've seen the changes, the wave of music that's come out in the last, how long has it been? 4 years, over 4 years now.
2019.
Since Air One went to worship, I've seen a transformation in the presentation and also the quality. And so when I was listening to your podcast, I found myself nodding a lot, and I rather enjoyed it. So I wanted to give you kudos.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, is this music director? Is that a new phase for you? I don't remember you telling me that before.
It's been like 3 years, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been
okay.
a minute. I think what I just felt, I don't want to say called, but I felt like I wanted to do some more stuff. We love our show. We've been doing it for 13 years. 13 of the 14 years we've been married, we've been doing our show together. So God's given us the talent and the desire. But I don't want to say it's easy, but it's just we've gotten pretty good at it together. So I wanted to do a little bit more with the station and especially with the ministry. And so I kind of went to him and said, hey, let me do music. And since then it's really taken off, and I've developed really good relationships with the labels, the artists, the churches. And I tell you, man, I wouldn't trade it for anything. I absolutely love it. It's truly a passion of mine. And, I'll spend, a few hours a week listening to worship songs basically nobody's heard. And I have a filter of things, a checklist, if you will, that I go through with each and every song. Is it theologically sound? You guys talked about that on that podcast.
Sure.
How, after that, then you get into the musically, sonically, how is it? Does it sound good? Is the production value there? Is it live? Is it too long? All those things. Radio's a unique animal. You really have to, just because a song had 9 to 10 million streams on Spotify doesn't mean it'll work on radio. So you just have to go through those filters, and that's kind of what I do. I'm not solely responsible, but for the music. So if I like a song, I will take it to we have a team of people that meets, and I present it. I basically come every week with a list of songs I like. If I love a song and go, this needs to be on the air, I don't really get resistance. I mean, it's just, that's kind of like that.
All right, Michelle, this is your gig.
Yeah.
Is it possible for you to, or how do you operate within that? It's like assuming that both of you are just as passionate about worship, but this is also your job. So I'm curious, are you worshiping while you work, or are you working while you worship? How does that dynamic work?
I think it just depends, because it is a 6-hour show that we do. And obviously there's a component to work, like you said, I might be doing some different housekeeping things, during the podcast. I have things to do. So you have split focus. We have breaks that we need to do. We take coffee breaks, different things. But we definitely also soak in the music and spend time worshiping. And we are always playing worship music in the car, in the house, So, but no, we're not having a listener experience by any stretch, because, we have housekeeping things that we need to worry about as well while we're doing the show.
Okay. Dan, I'm very curious, since you talked about the changes that you've seen in the time that you have been so solely devoted to playing worship music. Can you talk a little bit about maybe where it was, kind of as far back as you go with it, compared to where it is today?
Yeah, easy. When I should say I was not a part of the process of the station flipping to worship. But when they did, they kind of told us why would you take a station that a lot of people did love and flip it. What they found through the data was that in our demographic, which is, let's just say 25 to 34 female, okay, that's our core demographic, that we have the mass majority of our listeners are in that demo. they were going to wherever they could go, Spotify, Apple Music, whatever they could do to download and listen to worship by the droves. So basically, in radio, you provide a service.
Yeah.
And so here they are, our key demographic, and nobody's providing worship for them. Now, CCM will play, 2, maybe 3 worship songs an hour, but they want more. They want, I don't like to use the word experience, but that kind of applies here. They want that worship experience on Tuesday rather than just a Sunday. They hear a song on Sunday morning from their worship team at church, and they want to listen to that again. And they know it's on Spotify. And here we are not providing that for them. So we're like, okay, now here's the challenge. You'll love this part. We didn't have any really radio friendly music at that point. We had no data to go, what do we play? We had no idea what to play.
Right.
So we basically put all the songs that were just,
a lot of things
that were like, 30 million downloads, and we put them on the air.
Yep.
Soon discovered that, like I said before, those weren't ready for radio. Plus the lengths were insane. We're talking 8, 9. We had a 12-minute song.
Yep.
Because free flow worship, which is big in the worship community right now, that makes sense at a concert or church service. That makes total sense. But on the radio, it doesn't make any sense. So we saw that transformation. We started getting data. We started testing music, and we saw what people liked, what they didn't. And I firmly believe, I think our boss, or maybe even you said this, that Air One was created for 2022, or I'm sorry, 2020, because it basically started right before COVID, right before the world shut down.
Yep.
And so what we saw, the transformation from the artists and churches was this transformation to, hey, we're all hurting right now, and we're going to just cry out to God. What worship is all about, since we are created to worship, pure and simple. So what we saw, I'd say starting about June, maybe July of 2020, we started seeing different lyrics, more of these more raw and
Deeper.
real, like not the Christian cliche stuff, like, which there's nothing wrong with that stuff. Like, I'm so blessed, I'm too blessed to be stressed kind of stuff. There's nothing wrong with that. I'll put a smile on your face.
Yeah.
But this stuff was like getting us where we were. We needed it. We had to have this. So I don't know, man. It's God's timing solely, because you look at when we changed, it was months before the world shut down, and everybody had access to Air One. And man, it's been a ride ever since. And
it also gave us time to figure out the worship lane and what that looked like, and honing in on what Air One, because what Air One started as in January of 2019 is very different than, where it is today, because it's just been fine tuned and it just keeps getting better and better.
Are you guys able to monitor the feedback that comes into the station? Is that part of what you're looking at when you're saying that there's data available? Is it really just more numbers based, or are you actually getting emails and notes and whatever kind of correspondence to say,
we get texts,
I love this?
We get emails. Dan, as part of his music director role, sends out music tests. So we invite people all the time to sign up at air1.com and become an Air One influencer. And that helps us because they're rating the music. They're saying, we really like this song, or I'm so sick of this song, and so they're able to go through. And so, when we tell people, hey, like, this is your station, we want to know what you think, that is just a piece of the data that comes back and really helps us go, what do our listeners like? What are they connecting with?
That's awesome. Dan, because you said something about CCM, this is something that, has been somewhat of a, it's like I pay attention as well. And what's interesting to me in what seems to have been, and I think you're probably very right, so much of it was 2020 driven. There's such a wave of worship. And it's so different now, just from the aspect of they're all working together. That part kind of amazes me on one aspect. The other is that, I remember the first time I ever heard a Phil Wickham's song. It was probably like, 2008, 2009, and I would have classified him as a CCM guy. Now he's made a shift. A Natalie Grant. There's just been so many of those old guard types that are not so much CCM and really piling all their time and talent into worship. Is that part of what you have seen in the changes in the Christian music world?
I've seen that, but I've seen a more acceptance in the CCM world to worship.
Oh,
Now,
okay.
I think that there's still a brick wall in some cases in the CCM world to worship for whatever reason. I've heard that. I don't know why. But I think when you see bands like Maverick City Music is a great example, because here's a collective of, I think, 30 plus people
Yeah.
putting out, I think they've had 20 albums in like 4 years. I'm not kidding.
It's insane.
And they do all the genres. They're absolutely insane.
So talented.
I think when you've got people like them who are independent, by the way, they're not signed by a label.
Yeah.
I mean, what the heck? They're going out there and people are going, give me more, give me more. I think what I'm starting to see from the CCM side is more of an acceptance. When they see a song like Gyra just absolutely explode, they go, well, I may not like this song, but apparently my listeners do. You know what I mean? I think that they're starting to accept it. And as far as, Natalie Grant, you mentioned her, and Phil Wickham. By the way, that guy is just so talented. I'm glad he kind of more associates with worship, because I just love his stuff. I think it's because, like, Natalie Grant will sometimes do a lot of stuff with Belonging Co., her church, which is also a collective that does worship stuff. I think that's more the reason that you're seeing the old guard. I mean, Danny Goki did a song with the Belonging Co. that we played. Danny Goki currently, he's very CCM, has a song we just added on Air One, very worship, that's part of it. It was like, well, this is a worship song to me and to everybody at Air One. It doesn't really matter who it is or where they're from. The filter has to be in place.
Sure.
But is it worship? And a lot of people will ask me, and I'm surprised you haven't, and maybe it's one of your questions, but a lot of people ask me, can you define worship?
Oh yeah, that's downstream, man. Look at you getting ahead of me.
And it's
Well, we had the same question when we started, because we were hired on as part of the flip, and we were like, define this for us. Like, what is the station going to look like? Because we didn't really know.
And in full transparency, it took us a while to kind of to understand it and then explain it to other people, because you'll be in church and you'll hear what I would classify as a normal CCM song, right? So what is worship? Worship, as we see it, is vertical in nature. So worship is solely to God, not about God, or not about us. There's nothing wrong with us talking about the church, the body, and us, CCM kind of songs, but worship has to be solely based. Your focus has to be solely based on God. And that's really what worship is. So really what's cool about that opens up all kinds of sounds. You could have a country song, a rock song, whatever it is. Man, if it's worship, you know it. You know it right here. When it's worship, it's solely to him.
Well, even within that, though, I'm wondering, because something like that can still be a bit subjective.
Sure.
Is that kind of where is that where the teamwork that is involved on your end in choosing a lineup of songs or moving things in or out of a playlist? Well, I mean, what does that look like on the
I'll give you a great
show?
example. I'll give you a great example of a song we recently added. Maybe I'm talking about Consumed by Fire, like a month ago. Consumed by Fire, which I would classify as a CCM band. I hear them do this song live here locally, and I went to the record rep and I said, "There's something there." It's funny side note. He's like, "I've been telling you that for months," and I guess it slipped through the cracks. I get a lot of songs.
Sure.
Anyway, there's something there, right? And then they sent it to me, rather than the live version, I heard the studio version, and it was just one of those songs where you can't help but worship. I know it's subjective, but it was vertical and we felt it. We just felt it, and it's just one of those songs, and we just knew. I mean, Michelle heard it for the first time, and she's like, "There's something familiar about this song." She's like, "I feel it."
Yeah.
And, it K-Love ends up adding it too, and ends up being the highest rated song on both networks, and it's like, here we go. But I would definitely classify it as worship by a CCM artist.
Okay. Something else you said you were dealing with was it a label rep that you were dealing with on that?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Because of, I don't know, just modernity in everybody is available to everybody else. We don't seem to have those fences that, I think of somebody like a Brandon Lake, who I was so fortunate to have worked with years back. And now I see him doing stuff with Elevation, with Maverick, with Bethel, or out on his own. So much of all that side of things is so unorthodox anymore. And you don't have a band working on an album for 6 months and then they release it and then they tour with it. That's, I guess that's kind of my old school thinking. They're just churning out these bangers every 6 weeks or more frequently. How do you guys keep up when there just seems to be so much coming out of that machine?
I don't know. We listen to a lot of music. We listen to a lot of music, and we're in a season right now where we've added like, I don't know, 10 songs in the last 3 weeks, which is a lot for us, and so they're still doing that, Stephen. There's still artists that do that recorded album. Worship teams do that too, and then record label pull. Again, I go back to Maverick City because they changed the rules a little bit.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have a label and they're just like pumping it out. They're, and they're getting these downloads. People are listening. Elevation's the same thing. Elevation is its own label.
Yep.
But Elevation will do a full album, and then release the single. Maverick City, if they're like, we do our own thing, deal with it. But that's okay, because if it's, Maverick City doesn't need radio necessarily, but of course they love radio.
Sure.
But it just seems that they're edifying the body. When they put this stuff out, it's coming from the heart. They have these songwriter sessions, and they go, let's just do it. And they do it because they're not beholden to a studio, because they're just recording it live wherever they're doing, church.
Right.
And why not send it out to masses?
Oh yeah. Michelle, do you ever get songs just stuck in your head that you can't shake?
All the time. I wake up in the middle of the night and like I have a song on my heart, absolutely. Absolutely. I love that my kids do. I love that. We were singing a Bethel song earlier. I played like a snippet when it was playing when I plugged my phone into the car, and it's been in our head, ever since. So the goodness of God. So, it's just absolutely. And I think that's one of the cool things is it's kind of opened up for people. Everyone went through a lot the last couple of years, and having a place to worship and realizing that I don't have to be at church on Sunday morning. I can worship on a Tuesday on the way to work, and a Wednesday and a Thursday, and I can worship home and, on the way home and at home. And I just, I can always have that connection and that time. And we hear so many people that the feedback that we get from so many people who listen to Air One is like, it's my personal time with God. It's the time that I carve out in my commute to spend, laughing and also worshiping and just finding my joy, and the right song plays at the right time, and, just really blesses them. So it's.
Well, and when you get that kind of feedback, does it affirm? I mean, I see you two you are in ministry with this, but is that a good reminder for the both of you when you get feedback that somebody has just really found their own groove with listening, with worshiping?
All the time, because we get feedback, people, as we all do, go through hard seasons, go through loss, go through disappointments, and they're like, Air One's helped me find my joy again. Or, I was having a terrible day and I woke up and you guys were just making me laugh. I think one of my favorite, we get texts. I mean, we're on all the socials. And then during our pledge drives, we have a great platform to receive, an abundance of comments, which, really does. We always say with pledge drive, it's the most draining and filling thing that we do, because you leave the studio wiped, but the comments that keep coming in about how important this radio station is to them and how it's gotten them through so many hardships is, it's really incredible. But one of my favorite texts I think that he shared on the air was this person was like, just I'm predisposed to just kind of be like a not very happy person. I don't smile a lot. And I'm driving to work this morning and I'm feeling this weird sensation in my face. And I look in the mirror and I'm smiling. And I'm just like, thank you for putting a smile on my face, And so it's things like that really just, keep you going. And, just, you never know how God's going to use something we talk about, a particular song that we play. I mean, even our 59 seconds of hope, those speak to us, the verse of the day, all those things God uses to, reach so many people through the airwaves. So it's just a blessing to be a part of it.
Right. Well, and something you said just a little bit ago, Dan, also struck a chord with me because I realize how much my own listening patterns have changed because I've always considered myself a bit all over the map. I've never just been, I only listen to this kind of music, but I would say that because the worship industry seems to have crossed into so many genres that most days it's kind of like you could spin the wheel. I just driving home to do this interview with you guys, I was cranking some Kirk Franklin. And that's not somebody, I go back, I don't even like 5 years ago. It's like I knew who he was, but it just wasn't a part of what I listened to. But because there's so much amazing stuff that I feel connects me to God, those reminders, I love what you're just saying there, Michelle, that to know that that we're all experiencing similar things like that. And I just, the overarching verse that I've been using so much within this series is from John. And when Jesus is saying that the Father is calling us to worship him in spirit and in truth. And I think I'm never going to be in the camp that says that God caused COVID, but I know God could use that whole season. And I absolutely believe that one of the offshoots of that is when it feels like you've got absolutely zero control, where do you go? Where do you go? And that's the part of life, of worship, having blown up the way it is, has helped me. And from what it's sounding like, that's what you're hearing as well.
Yeah, and it helps us. I mean, we've worshiped through a lot as well. So
well, I think you kind of touched on it, but I think 2020 really highlighted people's need for other people, obviously, but how lonely people are and how hurting they are. We're out of that now, but we're still hurting and we're still lonely. So it doesn't. That's why I love Air One. I think one of the things we said yesterday was you're never alone. You may feel alone. Doesn't matter what you feel. He's right there. We have a tendency to as humans and Christians, we get in our own little worlds and we just take a moment and look up. And that's kind of what I love about worship, because it just kind of forces you to stop looking around at the trash around you, the noises, the distractions. Look up. And Michelle said, she hates that I bring this up all the time, but she said, Air One's like a mute button to the world. And I was like, whoa, nice. Time out. That's a bumper sticker. Let's get that. We'll put it on t-shirts everywhere. I was like, but it really is. I mean, like, if we just I talked about this on the air this morning. If we just spent half the time we spent on our phones scrolling TikTok and all the stuff. Can you imagine if we spent half the time just praying or blessing people or reading the word or whatever, worshiping, man, what a difference that would make.
Well, you make a great point there. And I agree that if we all had a more steady diet, for lack of a better term, of just, I don't know, for me, I always feel recentered. If I can just I don't have a very long commute, but if I can listen to 2 or 3 good songs that draw me into that, even in that short amount of time, it feels like, okay, we're back in alignment. Now, I'm probably going to need an adjustment later in the day because I leak. But I hope that a series like this that I've taken a dive into from a few different angles has caused people to think about it. I just wanted to break the mold of the thought process that says, well, yeah, worship is that first 15, 20 minutes at church.
Right.
And especially from the aspect, and I will say this as one who has been absolutely guilty of it, is that we can be so critical. Worship just wasn't that good today.
Oh, yeah.
that gal they had doing a solo. Whew, she was off. And I think I know I've mentioned it within this series. There was that Beth Moore tweeted about it a few years back, and that if we're just going to treat that like a movie, then bring popcorn and a soda. If all we're going to do is sit there and be critical. And I hope that with this wave of so much good worship music available, that we can get away from that mindset that just says, okay, shake it off.
Yeah.
And let's get back to what is truly the center point of all of this.
I think that stems from a lot of lifelong Christians do that, or Christians have been around the church for a long time. If you could recapture that joy, and since I was saved at 8 years old, it's different for me, but if you could recapture that joy of first knowing Jesus,
yeah,
it's like that. Or, if you can't quite understand it, like your first, true love, it's different. And I don't think those people, the ones that just came to know Jesus, first experiencing worship and really experiencing, are saying things like that. I really think that comes from us lifelong Christians.
Yeah.
Probably. Well, and I think it's been something he's had to really work at, being the music director for Air One, being worship. Obviously, when we go to church, what music they're playing, what songs they're choosing to sing. It's like he's got to turn his work brain off and just be Dan who's at church. So sometimes that can be not so much critical, but just kind of having that work brain, or this is a new song. What songs? You know what I mean? Instead of just being in worship. If I could speak for his brain.
Even one time we were in service, and there's this one artist that kind of started on Air One, and he's since kind of taken off, and I'm just so proud of him because I love his heart. He's a great guy. And our worship team here in Tennessee starts singing his song, and I take my phone out, take a picture of the lyrics, text him. I'm like, you made it to my church, man. So those kind of moments are pretty special.
Yeah. Well, once again, you made me think of something else, because I've worked in video production so long and live events. It's difficult for me to separate when it could be church, it could be a concert. Movies start falling apart for me when the plot line starts to jag. Then I start seeing technical errors, and I'm not in the movie at that point. Is it difficult for you to enter in to your own worship time? This last Sunday at church, is there always kind of that, I've never heard an arrangement like that, just because it's so much of who you are and what you do.
A funny side note to answer your question, when we came to Tennessee, we found that all the churches had fantastic worship.
Oh, sure.
Very polished.
I mean, you're going to find the most polished presentations ever. And we were kind of bouncing. We didn't feel like we were home. And one of the reasons we kind of landed where we are is because the church wasn't polished. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
I like to call it perfectly imperfect.
Yes.
Or imperfect, I should say. So, no, I don't think so. I kind of go in to that church, our church, feeling like this is not, a polished presentation, and I just go in with that kind of heart. So no, not really. Not thinking about how they're doing the song that I'm currently playing on Air One. I don't think about that stuff. It's all, how it is when you enter worship. You got to get all that stuff out. All the other stuff you're already dealing with, the fight you just had with your wife on the way to church. You have to get through all that stuff.
Yelling at your kids.
Kids are driving you nuts. We're already late. Coffee, all that stuff. So all that's, I think every Christian has this moment where you go, I need to stop and I just need to be with you. You know what I mean? And I think that's probably the biggest challenge for all of us.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
All right. With so much worship music available to us, in the right now. Do you think we could hit an oversaturation point? I mean, a good friend of mine and I, we talk about music all the time, and it sounds so corny to say, but he mentioned it one day. He goes, I have this fear that I'm going to die and I won't have heard all the good music that's out there yet.
Wow.
And I was like,
You find something to worry about.
Well,
Dude.
exactly.
I'm like, now I'm worried about that. As if heaven won't have a good jukebox.
Right. I think that's a pretty good band.
But
Yeah.
it's at some point, it's like, good grief. I would imagine, and you've already mentioned it, that at some point, is it just so hard to keep up with because there's so much available?
Well, I think one of the things that separates Air One from you, like streaming Spotify or streaming Apple Music, Amazon, any of those, and all those other services, is they have such a good music team and such a good heart for it that like they really curate a very good playlist. So I think as far as oversaturation, I mean, at least you're getting the best of the best with Air One. And I would imagine all those other services are somewhat looking to Air One to see what we're adding, what we're playing, and that's helping to shape their list. But if it was just like the wild, wild west free for all, and some was good and some was 22 minutes long, like I think then you might have kind of a like, what's happening here? But I think with Air One in the mix, that's really helping laser focus. And like I said, I mean, I can't speak more highly of this team of people that's just, they're so dedicated to the mission of Air One.
Right.
And working with the artists, working with the labels to just get the right sound, the right songs. And, sometimes they're scrapping for a song. It's like, we've got to add one and we have, not as many as we'd like. And then other times it's like, you got 10 good songs, but you can't add them all. So It's just different of worship. And so I think with Air One in the mix, it's really making a big difference.
Because I don't look for just songs from labels. I'm looking for songs from bands nobody's ever heard of. I'm not looking for, I actually we had to hunt down a church one time. We had to
in LA, right?
She used to be a TV reporter, so she's like,
I got it.
She's like finding, okay, this is the person's name. I'm like, had to call them and say, do you mind if I play your song on Air One? But it was like, so that's the oversaturation currently. But no, I think she's right. I think oversaturation really doesn't apply for us.
Well, and wouldn't you say that I think with the growing worship genre and movement, I think that you have a lot of maybe worship leaders that are like, oh, I could do that. So I think you even have just a few more hats in the ring than you would have had, even 4 and 5 years ago.
That's happening a lot more. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I love, that there just seems to be so much cross-pollination. Don't
ask me, man.
Yes.
Cross-pollinating. That there just seems to be such an amazing community in the worship realm, and that every one of them seems rather approachable. I don't know. It just seems like so much more of an even playing field. That whether you're leading church leading at a church with 200 people versus somebody who's touring and, got 15,000 people in a stadium, that they're all still, they're supportive of one another is what I've seen.
Oh, they're very supportive, and I'll quash any rumors of any artist or band that I've ever met. I met a lot of them. These are really genuine people with a heart for Jesus. You're going to hear, we're all flawed. You might hear stories about, hey, this guy did that. The church sometimes tears down the church.
Yeah.
But I'm here to tell you, these are just wonderful, wonderful
Salt
people.
of the earth, good people.
And I can't speak highly enough about them. 100%. I haven't had one situation where I'm like, that guy. You know what I mean? Like, it's just wonderful people.
Really kind.
All right, I'm going to have to hit both of you up for, we've covered the gamut here, but just for each of you personally, what does worship mean to you?
Connection for me comes to mind. Just having that connection, that time to be with him and to hear from him, to be convicted, all those things.
It's meant the world to me, not just because I work in this industry, but because I could be going through the worst of days and none of it matters. Like you were just talking about COVID, and you're not in that camp that God created COVID, but all the good that came from it. And if you just were to step back, hindsight's always 20/20, but you look back at your life, oh, God had me here for a reason. He did this. He's right there. And so often we're just not spending that time. And I think that's what worship is kind of forcing us to do. It's so important for your daily walk, your daily life, just everything for your kids. I mean, and I'm not just pimping out Air One here, but if you fill your home with worship, your car with worship while you're driving around your kids, I mean, you're doing something amazing. You're filling, even if they don't understand the words, you're filling that kid's mind and soul with the good stuff. It's just huge.
Well, it changes the atmosphere, whether it's your home, whether it's at work. We have people tell us all the time they used to have terrible road rage, and it's like, how do you have road rage when you're worshiping? And they're like, it's just my commute is so much calmer. Like I enjoy it, things like that. So wherever you are, at home, in the car, you're working out at the gym. If you're worshiping, it just changes the atmosphere.
If this was an introduction to Dan and Michelle for you, give them a listen. And if you don't have the Air One app, it's a great way to connect with them and keep worship music at your fingertips. This is the conclusion of the worship series, but keep an eye out for some shorter bonus episodes in the coming weeks. And make sure you're subscribed to The Nook on your favorite podcast app. I've got a couple of really thought-provoking series coming in March and April. Thank you so much for listening today, and I will catch you here next time in The Nook.
The Nook Podcast is a production of Sozo Digital Media.